Welcome everybody, Jinn and Tonic show. It is Friday. It's your favorite show on Islam. It is Friday evening, wherever you are. Well, it could be lunchtime actually, or it could be in the middle of the night. And it's early morning in Aussie land because sometimes we have Harris joining us as well. Okay, today is going to be a different edition of the Jinn and Tonic show because we're going to have a guest speaker today. So we're going to have a lecture on 90-foot Adam today, which is brilliant. I'm looking forward to that. But as always, remember, we are a show where we discuss Islam, and what we do is we talk about the good sides and the bad. So we don't only criticize, we also point out the good. And this is the goodie of the week, which was narrated by Abdullah bin Amr. A man asked the Prophet, what sort of deeds or what qualities of Islam are good? The Prophet replied, to feed the poor and greet those whom you know and those whom you do not know. And that is it. That is what is good in Islam, that you greet those you don't know. Now you know what it takes to be a Muslim, and it's a very good thing. I think this is a very positive thing. And if you want to know, this is from Sahih al-Bukhari, and it's in book 2, hadith number 5, or the USC reference is volume 1, book 2, hadith number 12. Okay, as always, I cannot go without this. Before we go to the main topic, we are going to go and take a look at some of the comments. There's only 3 today, so it's very easy on the eye. So number 1, we're going to look at this one, which is actually an old one, and this was on a video that I did many years ago, which had something like 3 million views. And this is something that I come across again and again, that people don't take too well to criticism. And here I made a video showing that the Iranian military just put out a fake. And then after a while, the video got taken down, then it got put up again, then it got taken down, then it got put up again. And then after a while, I think YouTube just had it and just got rid of it. And they closed the entire channel. And then this is the kind of reply that I got from a guy, Allahu Akbar, so glad that your channel got destroyed by, I think he means by YouTube. Truly hope that this one goes as well. I will pray that Allah will send you to the lowest pits of Jahannam, you hating bigot, good riddance. I don't know, maybe he didn't read the hadith that I was just saying. It's good to greet people, not to condemn them. Okay, next up we have a double whammy. This is 2 comments by the same guy as a response to a video that I made where I exposed this group. I can't even remember what they're called, No Clash or something, and their embryology video. And a guy thought, he didn't like that I come with facts and I come with truth, ethics, integrity, authenticity. He doesn't like that. So he says, say what you want, Islamophobe dog. I don't know what an Islamophobe dog is. Now, Islamophobe, we all know that Islam, we know, is the ideology, the political ideology. And we all know what a dog is. And we know a phobia is an unwarranted fear. So I am a dog who has an unwarranted fear of Islam. Oh, this is so funny. You know, really, it's like kids. But the name Osama bin Bush shows you what level we're talking about here and what age this guy is. And then, of course, he says Islam is the truth. The truth, Islam. It's like my car is the truth. I don't know why people say Islam is the truth. A statement can be true, or somebody can talk about something which can turn out to be the truth. But Quran is a 1000%, 1000% perfect in all aspects. Except if you go and look at the Quran, all I have to do is go look at the very first sentence in the Quran, which is not chapter 1, because we found out that chapter 1 does not really belong to the Quran. So the first sentence in the Quran is ALM. Now, how is that 100% perfect? I'm sure he doesn't even understand the Quran, because nobody understands the first sentence in the Quran, and nobody understands these single sentence, single letter sentences. I don't know why they call them sentences, but there's 29 of them, just in case you're wondering, and nobody knows what they actually are. Okay, here we go for the last one on this one. I think it's the same guy, and it says, you could do and try anything, but truth shall win. Islam is the end game, you dogs. Now, this is after I've shown the facts that everything about embryology in the Quran is wrong, okay? And he still thinks that this is. All your mothers and children will convert to Islam. No. And I don't know how many mothers I have. As far as I know, I don't know, maybe I'm different, but I only have one mother, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, this is what I've been told. I cannot prove it. If I have several mothers, I'm aware of only of one. Okay, this mother will not convert to Islam. Definitely not. And like that, and children will convert to Islam. My children will never convert to Islam. And you will bow in Islam. Okay, if I will bow in Islam, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe one day some God or Gabriel is going to come to me and say, listen, he's going to squeeze me and tell me you can't read, so recite and read, and I will. Who knows? But it's unlikely. Let's put it this way. Then he talks about embryology in the Quran. I think he means embryology, but he doesn't know how to spell. And even though he cannot really spell, he still decides to write something. And then he says, embryology in the Quran, Google it. Google it. I think there's something better that you can do. You can go to school. You can go to varsity. You can go and learn this, what embryology is. Then he says, pros are speaking, you dog. I mean, the girl who's just talking to us, she's not a pro. She's just a presenter. She's just presenting what somebody else is telling her to present. And who that is definitely not a pro, because he's just full of lies, full of nonsense. And I'm, comparing this nonsense to facts. And I'm taking the textbook, and I think I used Dr. Moore's textbook, and you can see that there's absolutely everything wrong in the Quran. But he says, by your voice, I could see how buttered. I don't know you are. Allahu Akbar. Okay. This is the level we're talking about. This is what's happening. This is what we're dealing with. And this is why we have the Jinn&Tonic show. This is why we have the Jinn&Tonic show, where we talk about the facts, where we give you what is actually in the Quran, we give you what is in the Hadith, and this is where it's at. Okay, so today what we're going to do, welcome everybody. I see there's a lot of people watching already. Great. Welcome to a special edition of Thunderous, who is going to educate us on something we find in the Quran, and that is Adam. And what is quite funny, some people say, well, if you take the passages on embryology that I always use, and this claim that all human beings are made of water or from water, I say, well, it's not possible, because if you tell me, like, for example, your teeth, are your teeth made from water? Well, then apologists come up with this idea, and they say, well, no, not really, but we all know that humans come from water. Mankind comes from water. All life comes from water. Now, what they don't understand, and I don't think what they're aware of, they're actually now embracing abiogenesis and evolution. But this trying to protect their Quran at all cost somehow stifles brain activity, and that is what it works. Okay, Thunderous, do you want to go? Thank you very much for doing this. It's really appreciated that, and I want to encourage other people as well to come and talk to us and give us special knowledge here. If anybody wants to talk about a specific topic, come talk to us. We'll set it up, and this is always welcome. And I admire people who can simply do this, get into a topic, and then come here and talk about it. Brilliant. Thanks, Thunderous. Take it away.
Hi, everybody, and certainly it's my privilege this week to present an article based on the authentic Islamic sources, and on this occasion we'll be discussing the hadith about Adam being 90 foot tall. I think the best thing to do to start us off is actually read the hadith, and the hadith I'm going to read is from Sahih Bukhari, Volume 4, Book 55, number 543, where it reads, narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Allah created Adam, making him 60 cubits tall. When he created him, he said to him, go and greet that group of angels, and listen to their reply, for it will be your greeting, and the greetings, salutations of your offspring. So Adam said to the angels, Assalamu alaikum, i.e., peace be upon you. The angels said, Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah. Thus, the angels added to Adam's salutation and expression. The hadith goes on more about the conversation between Adam and the angels, but the point that we want to grasp is actually the beginning, where it states that Adam in heaven was 60 cubits tall. The hadith concludes, though, by saying people have been decreasing in stature since Adam's creation. Now, for those who are not aware, a cubit was a measurement used in the Middle East hundreds of years ago. The measurement was based on 18 inches, and normally that measurement will be taken from the elbow, typically at the elbow of a human being, to the index finger. This, as an average, is 18 inches. Hence, 60 cubits, or 60 times 18 inches, would equate to 90 foot tall. So where do we start from this? Well, let's start exactly where the hadith starts, that Adam was in heaven 90 foot tall. But how can that be? The spirit realm in every other religion doesn't seem to have the description as having physical attributes. That is to say, when one considers the Bible, the description of heaven is never given at all. There are certainly some allusions and hyperbole and exaggerations in speech to emphasize a point, but no description is ever given. So why, if Islam is a continuation, is Muhammad giving physical attributes to the physical realm? Second of all, we can ask the question, before Adam sinned, he was sent to earth. Was earth created before or after Adam, and why was the earth created? But let's move on a little bit more further now. The Bible's description of Adam is only as a man. No height or reference to his features are ever given. The only thing that we know about Adam that is beyond our own human understanding is that he lived to the age of 939. That is as much as we know. So what other questions can we ask with relation to Adam from this in Islamic parlance? Well, one could be, how tall was Eve? What did they eat? Now think about it. A 90-foot man, what would a man eat to maintain that kind of metabolism that he will need on a daily basis? Most food is actually at ground level. So this would require a 90-foot man to get on his hands and knees and use fingers the size of tree trunks to actually scratch at the ground and pick up, at best, things that would be like little skittles, the little sweets that we have in our own realm, that Adam would have to eat consistently, daily, in and out. How could such a metabolism be maintained? How tall were the following generations, i.e. Cain and Abel? How tall are subsequent generations following? What has caused human beings to shrink? What did they wear? Even the logistics of making clothing would be beyond the realms of possibility for Adam to gather enough cotton, gather enough other kind of materials to make clothing suitable for him to wear and for his wife to wear in subsequent generations. Where are the fossils of 90 foot, 80 foot, 70 foot, 60 foot, 50 foot, 40 foot, and so on? Human beings. There is simply no evidence of human beings anything taller than the human beings that we have now. Where are the remains of giant homes? Where are the remains of clothing? Where are the remains of Adam's and subsequent generations' tools, their weapons? their pots. Perhaps someone in Islam can help us understand how did Adam's cardiovascular system work. Maybe they can help us understand how did 94 Adam's metabolism work. Another question that we can ask is, why do 98% of Muslims not know this about Adam? He is the first man, the father of all mankind. It is a significant teaching that he is 90 foot tall, and yet 98% of Muslims don't even know this. And of the 100% of the remaining 2%, why do they not teach it? What is it about Islam that makes them reticent to teach others inside the Muslim community, but even outside the Muslim community, about this stunning teaching that Adam was 90 foot tall? What other questions can we ask? Well, using the genealogy from Adam to Muhammad, as supported by 99% of Muslim scholars, it is accepted that there are 22 generations from Adam to Muhammad. The Hadith makes it clear that humans have been decreasing or diminishing. Now, there is no way of knowing the decrease rate, so using logic, we will give each generation a 5 foot decrease rate. So Adam is the first man, he will start at 94. Cain and Abel, we can respectively say, would have been 85 foot. Going down to Noah, it would be 84. Abraham then would have been around 40 foot tall. Where is the answer for this in Islam? Why has the human being height decrease rate stopped? Did Muhammad, when he flew to heaven on his Miraj, on the winged ass, did he, when he get to heaven, resemble Adam in height of being 90 foot tall? And if so, why did he not mention this? Now let's look at some of the arguments of Muslim apologists when they turn around and say, or try to answer some of the questions that we have about this. One of the answers that they have is that Earth at that time was smaller, so the Earth's gravitational pull was less. Therefore, subsequently, Adam's growth rate would have been increased beyond what we can imagine today. But that simply doesn't make sense, because if the Earth was smaller, then the Earth's surface distance from the sun would have been greater. If the Earth's surface distance from the sun would have been greater, that means the water cycle wouldn't have worked. The heating system would have worked. The planets would have been colder. And therefore, life on Earth, as we know it now, would not have been sustainable. Another argument that Muslims propose is that the Earth was smaller, but as the Earth was getting bigger in size and bigger in volume, hence the gravitational pull would have increased, and therefore humans are being shrinking in size. But that too doesn't make sense. For Earth's mass to get bigger, mass from another location would have had to have been pumped into it. For example, if you have a balloon and you inflate the balloon, you are taking the mass, the oxygen mass from one location, taking it into your lungs, then transferring it into the balloon, hence the balloon gets bigger. So if the Earth has been getting bigger in Islamic teaching, in their science schools, where is the extra mass coming from? Who is inflating planet Earth? Another argument that some Muslims will propose is that Adam was 90 foot in heaven and that he was not 90 foot in earth. But that doesn't seem to make sense, because it totally contradicts what the Hadith teaches. The Hadith teaches, and the tail end of the Hadith, and I'll repeat, people have been decreasing in stature since Adam's creation. Notice that, decreasing. That strongly shows that the human beings have been shrinking in size at an incremental rate. So it could not have been that Adam was 90 foot in heaven and then on earth he was a totally different size, because children were not born in heaven. Adam's offspring is totally unique to the environment of the physical realm, which is where we are today. So why are the Muslims helping us understand the teachings of Islam in this area? So those are the questions I've put out there. That's what I certainly have come to understand about Islam. And for any Muslim that is listening to the program, please, can you contact us and give us some answers to this doctrine and this teaching? And for any Muslims that are out there that are listening, maybe this is something you should be asking your imams and mullahs as well, to help yourself understand the doctrine of 90 foot Adam. And there we have it. That's my presentation for this week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. And I must admit, it's quite thorough what you did. The one thing, maybe I missed it. Did you go into fossil finds?
Hello?
Did you ever go into fossil finds? Did you ever go and investigate or come across the claims that they found the fossils, which were this size?
There was, I think it was Alicina. I stand to be corrected, of faithfreedom.org. Must have been about 15 years ago, where there was a press release of a Jewish archaeologists have confirmed the hadith about 94 Adam, and they did a wonderful Photoshop of a giant human being skeleton from a top view, and somebody digging the remains of such, and it was a fake and a forgery. What they'd done was cleverly put out there this story to see how quick the Islamic world will get onto the story to confirm that this was an actual evidence and an actual truth. And like, as predictable, the Muslim world did get onto it. They did say, look, the evidence is here, only to end up embarrassed and humiliated to find that the story turned out to be a forgery.
Oh, this was baiting.
No, it was a Photoshop. It was actually a superimposed juxtaposition of a skeleton man and somebody doing a dig somewhere, probably digging
but just
the foundation.
for fun.
Sorry?
This was done for fun, or the Photoshop?
Yeah, it was done for fun, but also it was done to see how quickly the Muslim world will catch on to this proof. And it was a Jewish archaeologist of all people that confirms the Islam and 94 Adam. But they do say that Adam's grave is in Saudi Arabia, and they show you evidence because they show you some kind of long build, sort of build. But the thing is, it is so thin. I mean, even I wouldn't sideways fit into it. He must have had from like a 34-inch chest and 22-inch hips. So there is no evidence, and there can't possibly be. You can argue, for instance, because some Muslims will say, well, during Noah's flood, the topography of Earth would have changed, so there's no way of you finding where Adam's burial is. But there's a difficulty with that because there are some unauthorized Islamic traditions that hold that Noah and two of his sons actually dragged Adam's body onto the ark because they use it as a separation between the men and the women. But then that still doesn't hold, because if the human beings have been decreasing in size post flood, human beings would have been 30, 40 foot tall anyway, all the way down to Abraham, if you take the 5 feet decrease rate per generation. So Islam is still in a dilemma because the decrease rate would have still been continuing post flood.
Did you ever come across a timeline when this Adam was supposedly alive?
Not in Islamic parlance. I mean, I normally look at Adam's existence from the point of view of the biblical genealogy. But when I've tried to look at it from the Islamic parlance, unless you're looking at the genealogy that they have on their own websites from Adam all the way to Noah, and the thing is that even though they present this as a genealogy, they've got no basis for the genealogy. There's nothing in the Hadith or the Quran that shows what the genealogy is, unlike what the Bible has. The Bible has it in the book, I think it's Chronicles, and also you have it in Matthew and Luke, the genealogy of Jesus. But they don't have nothing like that in Islam from Adam all the way to Muhammad. So I don't tend to go by it. The reason being, because when you ask some Muslims, for instance, well, okay, if that's the official genealogy, well, how long ago did Adam live? And, most Muslims tend to go into the millions of years ago line. So so then what you tend to do is, well, okay, then if you take 1 million years, then divide 1 million years by the number of generations, and then you've got people living for hundreds of thousands of years, or 50,000 years or 20,000 years. So either way, it doesn't make sense. Hence why I've not gone into that area, because you've gone into the realm of ridiculousness.
Well, I mean, the age claims are actually quite stupendous. And Noah was supposed to have built the ark when he was 950 years old or something.
What in Islamic parlance?
Yeah.
Well, you see, this is why I don't tend to go with the Islamic side of the genealogy and the age rates, because when you look at it and you analyze it, let's look at the dates and let's look at the ages and let's look at the genealogies. The numbers don't stack, so I tend to stay away from it. Hence why when I looked at 90-foot Adam, I looked at it from the point of view of, okay, he's come to Earth as a 90-foot man, but when you think about it, stops most food is actually on ground level. Now, can you imagine how many Skittles, or how much of a quantity of food you will have to eat if every piece of food you ate was the size of a Skittle or the size of a Smartie? You'd be eating. Now, when you think about it, the biggest food on planet Earth would be, say, something like a pumpkin or a watermelon. In having that food in the size of Adam's hand, it would have been no different to you and me holding a Skittle or a Smartie. He would have had to spend most of his living life just eating to maintain the metabolism, and those wouldn't have been carbohydrates either.
Yeah, I never
So,
thought about that factor.
so
I only heard the factor that the bones would never, I mean, there's no
yeah,
material on Earth that would be able to hold the weight of a human being, because we need to remember dinosaurs were built completely different. And their mass was supported by a totally different structure of bone. So the bone material of that we have in our body, our skeleton, would never be able to maintain the weight. I mean, this must be stupid.
yes.
I don't know what the weight is of a 90-foot giant. I mean, that's crazy. It's like 30 meters.
Well, it's also stops when you think about the cardiovascular system of a man that's standing upright. It's interesting you point out dinosaurs. When dinosaurs were initially found in the 18th century, they had most dinosaurs walking upright until they realized that the blood pressure to the brain, it wouldn't have worked. So now you have, when you're looking at images of dinosaurs, say within movies or within science textbooks, you have them walking more horizontally so that the blood flow can get to the brain. Adam's cardiovascular system would not have sustained the amount of blood that his brain would have required.
Okay.
His heart wouldn't have been able to function.
Well, but I mean, it's not only the Christians that have this stupid notion of the old age and giants, but I think there were a lot of stories, myths, legends around at the time, and the region, all talking about these kind of people. Did you come across any other myths?
Well, there are. I mean, when you look at that period, you have the Hindu myths. You certainly some will consider the Bible. I think in the Book of Genesis talks about the Nephilim, which are spoken of as a hybrid species that were extraordinary in size. But and then going on to say Greek and Roman mythologies as well, you have various giants in their teachings as well, in their beliefs. However, when you're considering the religion of Islam, this is beyond the giants. This is on a totally different scale. Whereas all the other ones that tend to be in the same kind of area, the same kind of heights, and the same kind of builds. You can take one of those images from, say, the Jewish slant or the Jewish stories, and you can put them in, say, with a Roman or a Greek mythology or a Hindu mythology, and you wouldn't look out of place. It would look very much, you've got the same image, you've got the same image in your mind as a thread going through all of them. When you come to Islam, you're dealing with something completely different. We're talking about a man that's 90 foot tall. We're not talking about 10 or 15, which is where your average is with the other religions. We're talking about something completely different. And you're not talking about one man. You're talking about his wife as well, and then subsequently the next generation and the generation after generation after. And that's where the problem lies for me, because you would have to, it would be easier for Islam to turn around and say, well, I don't know which Muslim you would speak to, because some believe that the flood was local, some believe it was a great deluge. Either way, you still have post-flood giants of fantastic scale and size, which doesn't seem consistent with what we know today.
Mm. Yeah. And the funny thing is, what we see in reality is exactly the opposite. The further we go back in time, the smaller the skeletons actually are. And it's only now that we are growing further and further. So there must have been a swing somewhere. And of course, all these fossils are hidden. Never come across them.
No, and these will be the greatest finds in the experience of human archaeology, or paleontology. You would not find any. It'd be the find of a lifetime. It'll be the find of all time. To find a 90-foot, 80-foot, or 70-foot man, there'd be nothing that could top that, so to speak. And there's a reluctance on Islam as well to actually bring forward any argument for it. I mean, you have people trying to defend it. Yeah, this yourself, Stops. When you bring something embarrassing about the religion of Islam, you find that because it's a lie, what do they end up doing? Having to lie to defend the lie.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is where we are. And I think that could be one of the reasons why they're reticent to mention about 90-foot Adam. You probably had this experience yourself. Like when you're talking about certain things with Islam, not only do you have to teach them what you believe, you have to teach them what they believe, because they don't know what you believe, and they don't even know what they believe either.
Yeah, that's true.
And this is one of those examples again about 90-foot Adam. They're very quick to challenge it, to deny it, but then they don't realize the authentic sources teach this. So when you show them the sources, the solid gape appears on their face, and then when you start asking questions, out comes the belligerence.
And by the way, in the chat, people are asking, I have jacked up the volume for Thunderous to maximum half an hour ago already, because people are complaining that they can't hear you, and they're telling me to switch to somehow push up the volume, and I've done that long ago.
I think what it could be is that I don't know how, and I don't want to go off topic here, but I think what the problem is, I accidentally deleted my Facebook account off my laptop, and I tried to put it on there again, and what it's done is it's just it's duplicated, if that makes any sense. I don't know if you've recognized it, but I initially got a friend request. I sent one to you, then I sent another one.
Yes.
That's gone on. That's for my laptop, and that's the one I want to use. That's where the better sound is. So at the moment, I'm having to use my iPad, and my iPad isn't very good for this.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, but I did jack it up as far as I could. So I'm sorry, I cannot make it any louder. But thank you for the suggestion. If I wouldn't have known this, then it would have been, quite valuable for me to get this input. But I'm sorry, this is...
What I can do is in the on the YouTube page where this will be going out, in the comments section, I'll actually cut and paste my points and put them in the comments section. So they'll be there for people to read. And include add their own points as well. There's bound to be people that have thought of points that I've never considered or you've never considered, that we can all learn from.
Did you come across anything else? Do you have his? Because if I remember correctly, he died also at the age of 920, 30, 40, somewhere around there, and then he had like thousands of children.
This is where yet again going back to Islam. It's just open statements. There's no evidence for if they had the genealogy, if there was any hadith, or if there was anything in the Quran that teaches anything like that, then we would have a basis. But as I'm sure you've had this experience, what you end up doing is you end up arguing one person's point of view, then you get another Muslim with it, because there's no foundation for the statement. So it's just things are thrown out in the air, and then one mullah or imam or whatever, or faker Nike will make a statement. It's unfounded, so you tear his argument down, and then all that happens is that 20 more variants will suddenly appear. So I tend to stay away from arguments where there's no foundation.
Okay. Did you go for the different arguments when people make claims regarding the Well, all the different claims surrounding Adam, because there are claims that he is. I mean, all humans are created from water, but Adam is created from dust. And the other thing is he was he created in heaven, or was he created on earth, or somewhere in a different universe? Did you come across any of that?
Well, the thing is to say he was created in heaven and then he was sent to earth after his sins. So logic would dictate that he was created in heaven first. And this is where my argument is with Islamic religion again, because it's not consistent with the Hebrew tradition. Adam was created on earth. When it uses the term he was made from the dust of the earth, in Jewish tradition, that just merely means that the elements that are found in the ground are also found in Adam's body, zinc, carbons, calciums, and things like that. But in Islamic parlance, he's created in heaven. So how can you? What I don't grasp is with the Islamic religion is then you're talking about another physical realm. So in what way is it spiritual? And then you're yet again giving physical attributes to another dimension, which isn't consistent with the way the Bible teaches things. So how can dust or mud or whatever material that Adam was made of exist in a reality where God lives? That doesn't make sense. God should, in effect, before he created the earth, there was, look at it from Islam's point of view. At one point, there was no angels, there was no jinn, and there was no Adam, and there was no earth. So that's in the spirit realm where Allah lives. That's where Allah resides. So when he made Adam, what material did he make Adam from? He will have had to have created that material first, but that material is physical. So how can physical realities exist in a plane of existence that's spiritual? That doesn't make sense. And I don't think any religion teaches anything like that other than the Islamic religion. But then, not making sense, we are dealing with Islam.
Well, I just happened to look at the chat, and there's somebody calling himself Abdul Lubda, and this is the obvious explanation. It's magic, you know. When Adam fell from grace, he was given a worldly decrease in stature, which mankind is still upon to this day. So what he is saying is Adam was created like a giant, 30 meters tall in heaven. Well, doesn't say where, but he was created somewhere as a giant. And then when he fell from grace, I don't know what that means, fell from grace. In the Quran, it doesn't say anything about that. He was given a worldly decrease in stature, which means he was then, honey, you've shrunk the kids.
But the
So
thing is, but then
God just shrunk him down. And then he says, when we enter paradise again, we return to that heavenly stature. So we're suddenly going to blow up again. And then we're all going to be 30 meters tall.
But that doesn't even make sense. What is the
No, it doesn't.
what is the relevance of mentioning Adam's height if he was 90 foot tall in the spirit realm? It has zero meaning or impact on the Islamic tradition of what you believe. If it was 90 foot, 80 foot, it has nothing, it adds nothing, it takes away nothing. However, the gentleman that's just made that response in the notes, in the comment section, he's challenging the hadith because the hadith says men have been shrinking since then. They have been decreasing. That's incremental. It does not say that Adam was shrunk to about 6 foot tall, and then human beings, because there are some human beings that are taller, so they haven't actually shrunk. They've actually grown taller. You've only got to look at the NFL in America or the NBA.
And no, Abdul, sorry, you didn't prove it. You claimed it. You just made the claim. But I think it's cute that people actually come to the rescue here and think that by stating, well, you were this height or this, you had this height, you were this tall in one place, and then you went to another place, and then and then you just shrink down to normal size. This is so cute.
But yet again, why would Muhammad make mention of Adam's height? What is the lesson of that? I mean, if you take away the beginning part of the hadith where Muhammad states that Adam was 60 cubits tall, and then you take away the conclusion of that hadith where it talks about human beings have been decreasing since then. What you have in the middle is basically the conversation between Adam, a man of free will, who can pose questions and answers and things, having a conversation with robots where he makes one greeting and they just respond in their with their default Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Yeah, that is the only thing in the hadith that would probably have anything to do with any relevance with Islam today. The beginning and the conclusion of the hadith have no relevance. So why are they there?
Abdul, this is talking about the height of human beings in paradise and not in the world. Where do you get this from? Is this your personal opinion? Is this something that you just came up with? You just thought of this? Or is this something that other people have come up with 1,000 years ago? Does it say this in the Quran? Where do you get this from? Because at the moment it seems like you're just pulling this out of somewhere where the sun don't shine, and it's not helpful. So
but this
is
what the gentleman was making the comments. This is a very typical Islamic response, isn't it? With something that totally. I mean, particularly when you consider that Islam, its default position is the wonderful science of Islam. It was way ahead of its time. This just shoves Islam further backwards, not forwards in time. 94 Adam.
Another thing that I would just quickly sidetrack on, if we talk about hadith, we need to understand there is something called the science of hadith in Islam, where the Muslim scholars maintain that there is there's always two components to a hadith. The one is the chain of narration, the so-called isnad, and then you have the contents itself. So if the chain of narration is supposed to be well, you can't really investigate it. You only look at it. You sort of look, are there names? Are there names that are familiar? Is there any corroborating name or anything? And then you look at what the content says. If this is plausible, then when all this fits, then it is classified as Sahih. Now, what we've found is that there are a lot of hadiths which are classified as Sahih, and you find them in Sahih Bukhari and in Sahih Muslim, but they are not. Yes, you do find them. But the problem is that Muslims will not, they will not go and say, well, actually, we are now going to doubt every single hadith and we are going to reevaluate the classification scheme. So people go by what it is in the collections of Bukhari and Muslim, and people, and we have this on record where somebody like Adnan Rashid says, we are 100,000% sure that all the hadith, this is to be treated like revelation. And this is the problem. So if we then go and take a hadith and look at it, I mean, I try not to. Okay, I try and stick to the Quran because there's no doubt that the Quran is the Quran is the Quran. So I try to. But if we go and we look at the hadith, then we need to understand that the people who believe it, okay, are the people who are making the claims. I don't believe in any hadith. I don't think a single hadith is true. They're all fairy tales. They're all fabricated. They're all made up. And the problem is that if you believe them, then you believe them, and then you can't just say, well, I'm selecting this one is Sahih and this one is not. Either you believe it or you don't. And this is the whole problem here.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Stops, on that one, to be only Quran only. However, the tradition of Islam is the Hadith as well, and I totally agree with you. You're going into murky water when you're dealing with the Hadith, because you have those who will go with it, and then you'll have those who don't, that don't. And I find that with Muslims, it depends on how ridiculous the Hadith is as to whether they'll testify to it or not. That's where I stand. This is why I tend to watch a lot of the Muslim channels like Peace TV or Asim Al-Hakim and all the other scholars for dollars, because I use them not because I've got any interest or because I'm learning from them. I'm waiting for them to say something that I can then turn around and say, right, I got you. I've got that scholar agreeing with this Hadith. So it's now not just the Hadith. I've got the scholar for $1 who's a world-renowned, and all the other guy is who I'm speaking to is just a nominal local Muslim. It is now the Hadith and this scholar versus the Muslim I'm speaking to.
Yeah. So this is Abdul as well. He's saying this means Allah made Adam and his height was 60 cubits. So, okay, are you now saying that Allah is 60 cubits high? So this is quite serious, and this is why I would love to have some scholars' opinion on this, and I think they will agree with you. They will simply say, okay, yes, 60 cubits, that's where it is. 30 meters, that's a good height for an atom. So let's make it exactly that height.
Well, this is like, for instance, I watch a lot of Asim al Hakim, which is a well respected scholar for dollar in the Middle East. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but in the past year, he's confirmed the drinking of camel urine as authentic, and also and the Muslims shouldn't question it. Just because science hasn't found any benefits of drinking camel urine doesn't mean to say that that the Muslim world should deny it. And the other one is about them dipping the fly into the food. So that's why I watch them, and that's why I tend to go with those kind of hadiths. Not just because they're the most ridiculous ones, but they're the most ridiculous ones I'm finding that the Muslim scholars for dollars are actually sanctifying, if you like, to the Muslim world.
Exactly. And Beej is asking a good question. In reality, would this story have come about because the depictions of kings are being portrayed much taller than regular folk?
But the thing is that there were kings have been. I mean, many even foes have been pictured as being much taller. Depending on your perspective, as enemies have always been portrayed as being bigger than what they really are, and the people, your king is normally presented as a bigger person than what he really is, but not 90 foot tall. We're not talking about something that's 10 foot or 12 foot. We're talking 90 foot tall. We're talking 4 times taller than a giraffe.
Yeah, okay. But I think this is where it came from. They just wanted. I don't think this has anything to do with reality. This is just pure exaggeration. Okay, so they just wanted to make it look as though Adam was much, much bigger than everybody else, without thinking about the consequences, not thinking about what this actually means. So.
I know I've listened to arguments about Muhammad, whether he really existed or not, and you know what, I can depending on the mood I'm in, I can sit on either side at any one given time, because both of them are good arguments. And sometimes when I listen to the stories of Muhammad, for instance, where somebody would ask where Muhammad would turn around and say, "Do you know where the sun goes?" And then the companion would turn and say, Allah and his messenger knows best. And then Muhammad would then tell a story about how the sun will go underneath and prostrate itself before Allah, and then so it'll ask if it can go and rise again. And I just find that this guy, if he did exist, he was just making this shit up as he went along.
Exactly.
As he went along, he was just making stuff up. He must have been looking at these people thinking, what a bunch of mugs they are. I can just tell them anything and they believe it. And I find that the 90-foot Adam is a part of that kind of, like, he was having a laugh with them. Though they themselves, they took it as literal, because they'd have been just as illiterate as he was. I mean, when he turned around and says things like, go check it out, go see people of the book, it was like he knew they wouldn't do that. So he was calling a bluff. But he knew he was calling the bluff, and he knew he had them, because he knew that they wouldn't do that. That's the implicit trust that they had in him. It's a bit like, have you ever come across a person that's been lying to you, stops to your face, then they're asking you to go verify, go and see if I'm lying or not. But you know they're lying, but you don't go check out to see if they are lying, but you know they are.
Of course, yes. I've had this a lot, of course. Yeah.
As human beings, that's how we are. And I find that the 90-foot Adam is just another typical example of what Muhammad was doing back in the 7th century.
Yeah. TJ, just send me a message on Facebook or Skype or something. Okay, Beej, they should just remove all the weak hadiths. Why keep them? Well, this is exactly what they did. I mean, if you look at the story, if you look at the history of Islam, you will see that over the course of 300 years, they collected something like 200,000 or 300,000 hadiths. And then they found that most of them were fabricated. So what they did is they deleted them again. And they apparently, they went, somebody's complaining that I'm too loud. Okay, so what happened is you have Sahih, you have Hasan, you have Da'if, you have a lot of different classifications for hadith. And they removed all the ones which they did not trust 100%, and they only kept the ones which they thought were Sahih, which means authentic, and those are the ones that you find in the collections of Sahih and Bukhari.
When you go back, just going back to 90 Foot Adam, when you think about it, just the logistics of clothing, for instance, to make clothing for Eve or the next generation or the following, 80-foot human being clothing, 70-foot human being clothing, or the pots and pans that they would have needed to use, or their dwellings like a bed or a chair or a house, the logistics. I mean, now I stand to be corrected, but it doesn't take long after the first, second, third generation before they start factioning off into wars and tribes and start killing each other. So where are all the weapons? How comes nobody has found any weapons of these giant human beings, like giant weapons, like a giant bow and arrow and a giant sword, or, a giant, sledgehammer, or giant tools for their normal everyday life? It's these little things, these subtle little things that Islam doesn't seem to want to address. That further, it exasperates me, to be honest with you. It exasperates me.
Then why so religious? He just supplied the perfect explanation. This is so cute. In Tabari, when it says Adam was 90 feet tall, the reason that Allah made him smaller was because he was on a mountaintop and could see into paradise. The angels complained. So to believe Adam was 90 foot tall, Muslims must accept the flat earth and deny space as a vacuum.
Oh, so if you go 100, so how comes the space shuttle hasn't got it? Says the space got into Where is the European Space Station now?
Yes, this is so funny. Okay, Abdullah Samir made a video on Muhammad, and he said that he made stuff up. Yeah, there are so many different versions of how the Quran came about. There are so many different versions of how the Hadith came out. So saying that Muhammad, number one, you have to accept that Muhammad existed. Okay, there's no evidence that Muhammad existed. Then, well, as described in the Sunnah, okay, I'm sure that there was a Muhammad, but not like in the Sunnah. Then you have to accept that this is one person who wrote the Quran, which I don't believe it is. I think it's a concerted effort, which you can see from all the different styles and the way that it is written, with all the various repetitions. You can see that different people wanted their say in this book. So no, I don't think that Muhammad was a real person. I don't think that Muhammad wrote the Quran. Definitely, we know for sure that Muhammad did not live in a place called Mecca, because that did not exist at the time. So it must have been much, much, much further north, and probably a concerted effort. So there are a couple of assumptions that Abdullah Samir makes here, which I don't agree with. I say we do not know. We can't be sure. There is not enough evidence to make this kind of a claim. So I don't think that Muhammad wrote this and make it up. No. Then we have tickling the ostriches. Let me guess, there is no scientist getting access to Adam. Yeah, this is actually interesting. Thunderous, in your research, did you find anybody trying to get any kind of access to this grave that you found? Is there any way that we can verify any of this?
Well, it's ridiculous that it is a grave considered to be of Adam anyway. I mean, let's assume we'll go along with the Islamic narrative. There's two outcomes here. First of all, if we go along with the Islamic narrative of the flood, the topography of the earth would have changed. So you wouldn't know where the grave is. Nobody of anybody pre-flood, their graves would not be anywhere that you could see, because the topography of planet Earth would have changed with such a great deluge. The second alternative would be the story, which isn't in Islamic sources, about Noah and his two sons. And I don't know how they managed it, because, we're talking about a creature that was probably weighed, the equivalent of 5 elephants. How three men and 4 women could drag on the body of a 90-foot man onto the ark, you know, that in itself raises enough questions. But let's just assume, let's be generous, that they did. The ark, Noah's Ark, I think in both, it is certainly in the Bible, but I stand to be corrected in the Islamic recension. When the waters abated, it found itself on the mountainous region of Ararat. I can't see how, 7 human beings would have been able to take a 90-foot body, dragged it from Ararat, which, let's assume that we'll go with the narrative, which is in the region of Turkey, and dragged it all the way to a location where they could bury it. It's just beyond. Yet again, it adds a further dynamic of stupidity to the account. So,
Right.
for me personally, going with the Islamic sources, let's just assume that the Great Flood ruined the topography of Earth, so you wouldn't be able to find it.
Oh, goodness. Okay. This is always the question. Why do you believe this? The Quran is wrong regarding formation of human beings. What more is there to say? Well, this is the thing. What are people trying to achieve with these stories? What are they trying to do? Well, obviously they're trying to impress people. Obviously they're trying to get people to say, wow, this is so amazing. I need to go and convert. I need to follow the God described here and the prophet, because they are such great things. And I'm going to not be alone in this. There are millions of people who are doing the same thing. So where lots of people are correct and who have looked at this, they can't be so wrong. So maybe I should go and follow the same thing and just follow the rituals just to be on the safe side and do this. So this is where this comes from. And then they say, well, how can we get people to do that? Well, Christianity, Judaism, they're very successful. Zoroastrianism, let's copy stuff from them and make it into an Arab version. And then that's what you get in the Quran. That is the way that it works. There's nothing more that I can see there. I only see man-made nonsense, where everything in the Quran is actually wrong. And I've issued this challenge on what you call it, on Facebook, on this Muslim group, Muslim Challenge, where I'm asking, can you please go and tell me and show me something in the Quran that is correct? And lo and behold, nobody so far has been able to do so. Nobody has been able to show me anything that is verifiably correct in the Quran, that you can go and you can check and you can say, okay, this is correct and here's why. Nothing so far that I have ever seen.
And you raise an interesting point there, Stubbs. I mean, let's just look at because as I've stated before, I normally come from the biblical perspective of, let's see if the account follows through into the Quran with consistency. Let's just assume then the argument comes from, say, a Muslim about Adam, from the biblical recension of him being 939 years old. Well, for starters, you wouldn't be able to find the body because the topography of Earth would have changed as a result of the great deluge of Noah. And then even if you did find the body, you wouldn't know it was his body, and you wouldn't be able to prove that it was 969 years old when he died. However, it's irrefutable with the religion of Islam that it's a 90-foot body. When we measure it, it could be nobody else other than Adam from the Islamic, from Adam's ascension. And what I find with what you're saying there, is absolutely every account that you read in the Quran and the Hadith should have its own unique a way of verifying it. I'll give an example. We're talking about, 90-foot Adam. So we should be able to find the body of a man that's 90 foot tall, 80 foot, 70 foot, 60 foot, and so on. Even if you find the body of a 40-foot-year-old foot tall man, what you're doing is that you're giving credibility to the religion of Islam, that even though you don't have the body of a 90-foot man, the fact that you've got the body of a 40-foot man gives credibility to the story of a 90-foot man. Does that make sense? Yeah,
of course. Yes.
Now, right. Then when you go to, say, the Quran, and you've got Dul Qarnayn, and it is I used to say copper. I had to go to the account again. It's not copper covered iron ore. It's a what's the metal? It's not flipping copper. It's the giant iron wall between two mountains that he's supposed to have built, which should still be there today.
I think it is iron and copper, yeah.
Everything in Islam should be verifiable. This man, this Dhul Qarnayn, should be the most known about person in history. Nobody could be more famous than him, more famous than Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus the Great, Darius, or any of these historical realities that we know, which are incidentally in the Bible. But Dhul Qarnayn should be the most well-known of the lot of them for two reasons. One, for the greatest industrial event ever with the giant wall, and second of all, because Allah blessed him to do as much as he did. This will be the most famous man in history, unproven via historical accounts of a man of such fame, and second of all, no wall. And this is where the inconsistency of Islam comes through time and again and again. It has no history to back it up. It has no antiquity to back it up. It has no archaeology to back it up. It has no science to back it up. It has no prophecy to back it up. It has nothing to back it up at every point of the way. People could argue about the Bible, fair enough. You could probably argue, people could give an argument about the Bible. However, what you can't deny is that the world powers that it mentions and the subsequent heads of those world powers were actually real people. You don't have to believe in the Bible to recognize that those are real historical people that actually did exist. Nineveh was a real world power. Babylon was a world power. Egypt was a world power. Assyria, Medo-Persia, and the Greeks and the Romans are all real world powers, and the names mentioned have been verified in history. The Quran has nothing like that.
Yeah, and then on top of everything else, they copy the stuff, which they then misunderstand. Because Beach was just saying that there's a myth, a legend out there as well, where the sun sets in the deep and then runs through a canyon and comes back up. So this is also something that you find that other ideologies, other societies, other cultures have different ideas about the origin of certain things. These you will find repeated in the Quran, but a lot of them were actually misunderstood. And therefore you get a lot of mistakes in the Quran regarding the old stuff.
It could well be that Muhammad, let's assume that he existed for the sake of the discussion, came across a story from Jewish tradition that Adam was 939 years old when he passed away in death. So what does Muhammad do? He does what Muhammad always does best, takes an account and embellishes it for himself. Yeah. Which is what you get every single time. There you go. Every single time he does the same thing. It's a trait of his. He takes something and he embellishes it.
Yeah, and then it comes out wrong. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I want to welcome TJ. TJ, before you go, let me just, Abdul Lubda said that I said I have been studying Islam for 10 years. That is not true. I said I have been refuting the claims made in Islam, made in the Quran for 10 years. I've been studying Islam only for 3 years, okay? But that was, I don't know, 7 years ago. And I did not take any Arabic class. Of course not. You know, I mean, I realize that I am in the 21st century and we do not need to take, ancient Arabic, a dead language, which you only need for one single thing, and that is to read the Quran. I don't need that because we have translations because we're sitting in the 21st century. So it's no longer necessary to learn an entire language just to read one single book. So number one, no. What you are claiming is not what I said. And number two, it's irrelevant because we are where we are today. TJ, welcome. What do you think about Adam? Do you have anything that you can contribute, you want to say about this?
Well, if he was 90 feet tall, I'm thinking he might be like one of the titans that was mentioned in Greek mythology. So maybe Adam was a titan. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, this could be another origin. Absolutely, yeah. But there's nothing. The funny thing is that you can speculate, okay? But there's nothing that you can actually say. Okay, here we are, and this is why it is. So it's all down to just, well, it could be this, could be this, could be that, but that's all.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know. It's. I think that we can jump circles around this topic all we want, but ultimately, I mean. What are we really discussing here, right?
Well, we are discussing a
Yeah.
fairy tale, but I think if we're talking about Cinderella, or if we're talking about Little Red Riding Hood or Snow White or something, at least we're trying to understand why it is that people believe this. Why do people actually think that this is a description of reality when it is not? And this is the point that we're always trying to make. This is why there was a question earlier on, is there any other channel like ours? Not that I am aware of. I think we are the only English-speaking platform which allows an uninterrupted, uncensored discussion on Islam. So this is what I think, and this is why we're talking about it. This is why this exists. Let me just say the fanciful, why not Hungarian? Why not Hungarian? What? Have you read the Bible? Oh, you can get this in different languages, probably. Another question. Oh, hi from South Africa. Yep. And how's it? How the hell did your Nadia Ahmed video get so many views? Oh. I think it's up on 500,000 or something. Well, the thing is that this was Nadia Ahmed is an apologist. I mean, he is such a dishonest prick, really, and we've done him a couple of times, looking at how dishonest he really is. So one of his claims was when he called into the Jinn&Tonic show, he said, "Well, breastfeeding in Islam is the perfect description, and science is in line with it," and he made this claim, and then he said this and this, and these are the quotes, and this is the source, and blah. And of course, here live on air, we couldn't really verify everything. So I made a video about this, and I called it Nadia Ahmed and his breastfeeding. And apparently, a lot of Muslims jumped to conclusions, because when they see the name Nadia Ahmed, they think, well, this is an Arabic name, and then breastfeeding, they think, oh, boobs, boobs, boobs. So they automatically go off, and this is why people, you know how many times I've received emails from people, I have a misleading title, I need to delete this, I need to rename this, and this is wrong, just because they are thinking about boobs and breastfeeding, and then they go and click on the video. So I think this is actually quite funny. So. Okay, stories were originally not meant to be literal, but people later took them literally, and Islam fell for this literalism, hook, line, and sinker. This is from Carlo Arab. Yes, I agree 100%. This is what TJ, I think, was just talking about, that the stories were there, and they just wanted to give it the Arab sort of flavor. And then they came out a little bit wrong, and for various reasons that we today cannot relive, recount, redo. We can't verify any of the old claims, what happened at the time, why they did this. All we can do is speculate, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can honestly say, can't you, looking back now, in the past, say, 15 years, 20 years, since the internet has exploded for people, and it's become the mainstay and stream of people's education now when they're doing research, that Islam didn't anticipate this. They didn't anticipate that Islam will be exposed in such a way, and that the information will reach the hands, minds, and hearts of so many people at any one given time. And I think some Muslims have now got to the point now where they've almost like got to set their stall out now. They either say yes to it or they don't, or they can't say yes to it. And this is why now, for instance, I'm seeing, where Islam, their apologists are being a little bit more honest in what the Quran teaches, because they've got nowhere else to go now. They've got to say yes, they believe this as a truth. And I'll give an example. I watched an interview recently of Faker Naik talking about Muhammad splitting the moon, and and his response was, NASA have confirmed that there is a fissure on the moon. That is to say that it was split open like a crack, a fissure, like a break. And that fissure is representative of when Allah put the moon back together again. But nobody, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but nobody seems to want to address the point that the splitting of the moon in Islam would be the greatest celestial event since the creation of the universe. No other celestial event will compete with it. And yet, nobody in history records it. No Zoroastrian, no Jew, no Christian, no pagan, no heathen, no politician. And that's just not in the Arabian Peninsula. You would see the splitting of the moon all the way over to India. You would see it in Spain. And yet there is not one historical account of the greatest celestial event in the universe since the creation of the universe.
And Peach, again, this is so true because I had this discussion not so long ago, and somebody said NASA proved. I said, listen, so many Muslims have actually been calling NASA that they had to put this on their homepage. No, the moon was not split. There is no evidence for this. This is just a fairy tale. And yet, even though NASA put this on their own pages, there are still Muslims claiming that NASA has actually confirmed that the moon was split and that these lines are actually evidence for the bad workmanship of Allah, who was unable to put the moon back together properly.
Come on, guys, let's not be so Islamophobic. Maybe it happened. We just don't know yet. Come on, keep it up.
We've got how many? 1,400 years of history. Certainly, a lot of people were able to write in other parts of the world, as opposed to Saudi Arabia at the time. And there's not one recorded event of the greatest event since the universe's creation. Not one recorded event. No one's considered to write it down. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't that also apply to the prophet's whole existence? I mean, do we even have a contemporary reference that somebody wrote down about him? I mean, do we have anything at all?
About what?
I mean, about the prophet's existence in general. Like,
what I think Stops and me commented on it earlier on. Me personally, I can listen to a person give a presentation about Muhammad's existence, and I'll think, yeah, fair enough, I can go with that. And then I can hear an alternative account, a counter argument, where somebody says there is no evidence of Muhammad's existence at all, and then I find myself thinking, wow, I could go with that too. So it depends. It depends what mood I'm in. That determines which camp I'm sitting in at the time.
Okay, yeah, but it's the same with Moses, same with Jesus. There is no evidence. Okay, people would like for evidence to be there, and this is why they're then grasping at straws, and then they come up with these Josephus, Tacitus, and blah blah blah, and once they start looking at them, they find, oops, there's nothing there. The same thing we have with Muhammad, and they say, well, we have all these external sources as well. We have the Jacobi doctrine. We have all these other. No, but once you start looking at them, you find, oops, no, not really. So at the end, you're left with absolutely nothing. It's just faith. You think there was a guy called Muhammad, Jesus, Moses. You have Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, and Snow White. And if you want to believe they exist, sure, go ahead. But just don't bore me with this nonsense.
Just to throw a spanner in the works, I do actually believe Jesus did exist, but that's another subject.
Okay, well, we're not going to go there at the moment.
Absolutely not.
Yes, we have heard about the light coming out of the pudendum of Amina. Yes, this is a huge claim, and the light it illuminated the palaces in Syria. So yeah. Did Buddha exist? Well, actually, this is the point. Maybe this is something that I should know. It doesn't really matter whether or not Jesus, Moses, or Muhammad, whether they actually existed, because it's the message that is the important thing. It's the impact that the name has, because all you need to do is mention Muhammad, and people already start screaming either blasphemy or whatever. And this is the thing. It's the message. It's the impact that these people have, and not the physical existence. And this is the same thing with Cinderella. We talk about Cinderella today. We still use this metaphorical approach of put the shoe that fits, or something like this. So we still use it today. So it's still valuable. It's still there. We still use it, and it's okay. Did she really exist? Hardly, but it's still there. So it's the message, I think.
I think
Stops. I disagree with that, actually. I think that when you talk about Christianity and Islam in particular, I would use the phrase history centrism, meaning that, that these claims rise or fall with the existence of those two individuals, I think, because let's not forget Jesus was, claiming to be the Messiah, and, Muhammad was claiming to be the final prophet of Islam. Whereas
but
if
they're
you look
tokens. They're tokens. They're not real people.
well, no, I understand that, but I'm saying that, for the believer, if they didn't exist at all, then those claims will collapse on themselves. Whereas I think if you look at the Eastern traditions, I don't think that those claims are made, that there was some sort of redeemer, or somebody making claims that I was predicted at so and so time or whatever. So I think that with Christianity and with Islam in particular, I think that that their claims rest upon a sort of historical narrative. So if those two individuals did not exist, I think that would mean the ultimate collapse of those two traditions. In my view.
But it doesn't.
How so?
Well, they're still around.
Well, no, I mean, I'm saying that if they were definitively proven not to have existed,
well, how do you do
Christianity
that?
and Islam.
Yeah, but Jesus definitely did not exist, for sure, 100%.
Well, there you go. Is what I'm saying. I'm saying that the claims that are made.
Yeah, but with Jesus, it's very easy, because if you look at Matthew, for example, it says there that you need to have the earthquakes, you need to have the zombies running around Jerusalem. So this never happened, obviously. This is 100% that this did not happen. So all of the stories, if you look at the Gospels, they don't even know when Jesus was resurrected. The number one, the central theme in the whole of Christianity, and you have four people. The one says it's dark, the other one says it's daylight. They don't even know when this happened. They don't know how many people were there. They don't know whether it was open or closed. There are so many inconsistencies. So everything about the story is wrong. So I can guarantee for 100% that it has never happened, because it's ridiculous. Nobody actually knows what is supposed to have happened, and there are no witnesses. There's no evidence for any of this having happened. So with Jesus, I'm 100% sure. With Muhammad, I'm a little bit less sure. There was probably somebody called Jesus, charismatic guy, but I think there was more to Muhammad. I think there must have been one particular person in the Arabian Peninsula who was incredibly good at killing people, at plundering, and at the same time joining people in a very diplomatic way. And I think this is what we see as a reflection of Muhammad as the person who was able to live according to Islam. And this is the token that the people needed to show, yes, Islam is good. It's good for you. You can handle it, because look at this fantastic person, Muhammad. He was able to do it. He was a Mohammedan, I didn't say, a Muslim. So can you. And I think this is how it fits together. So I don't think we need the people as such.
What you're saying there, Stops, kind of reminds me of a movie that was out in the 70s. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. It's called The Warriors.
No.
Okay.
Not that I know. No.
It's a cult movie. The interesting thing at the beginning of the movie is a guy called Cyrus. And he's basically speaking to all of the gangs of New York, like the Bloods and the Crips and the this, that, and the other, saying, well, you're all fighting for 10 square meters of turf, and there's only 10,000 coppers. But if we all unite as one gang, we would be 100,000 strong, instead of squabbling with each other. And I've always kind of looked at what you're saying there about there was this charismatic guy that was a bit of a gangster. And I always look back to that movie and Muhammad and think to myself, that's, what you're saying there kind of sits right with what my perception is, that it was a charismatic guy that could see that the Arabs were all just a bunch of, squabbling tribes. And all he did was he galvanized them into one tribe.
Correct. Absolutely.
Galvanized them, and after that galvanizing, set himself to bigger things, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah, this is exactly it. Yeah, I agree with that. Charles Martel did the same thing in France. When the Muslims were up in Poitiers, and they'd taken over the Spanish, the Iberian Peninsula, and they were moving into France. And then Martel went and he did exactly this, consolidated all the armies that were squabbling, all the kingdoms, the fiefdoms that were squabbling amongst themselves, put them all together, and then drove back the Muslims. Same story, yeah, exactly. Except that Martel then stepped down and didn't go any further, so yeah. Okay, great. What else do we have? Can we prove that Jesus died and resurrected? No, we can't. Please help me. What is the surah with the mathematical error? It's surah number 4, Nisa. Then we have Abdul Aziz, atheist logic. There is no such thing as atheist logic. I don't know. Why can't you learn?
What was
Universe came out of nothing. What the fuck are you talking about? Go to school. Stop talking shit. Okay. Abdul Aziz, Toby, you are making a bad name. I don't know. Maybe this is your intention. Maybe you're a Christian who's coming here pretending to be a Muslim to embarrass all Muslims and make Muslims look bad, because that is what you're doing at the moment.
Who's making Muslims look bad?
This guy in the chat.
You don't need Christians to make Muslims look bad. You just need the Quran and Hadith to make Muslims look bad.
Yeah, but there's one guy here who's coming with stupid claims, and I've seen this before, that people pretend to be like they will come and they're just trolls. Okay, they just try and interrupt and see our reaction and see how we get angry with them and things like that. Okay, I've done this now for 10 years. So
just tell them dollar digits and then get online and let's have a conversation with them. Anyone could be a key addy.
Yeah, but then if this is the same Aziz, he's going to carry on talking and we're getting absolutely nowhere. Okay, this is the 19 era. We've done a whole show on this, several in fact, so I'm not going to go into the 19 era at the moment. Okay, is there anything else on individual people in the Quran? Because we've got Adam, we've got Noah. Now we know Noah was also equally old. Was he also equally tall, or was he in any I don't know, shape or form similar?
This is what I'm saying. You know, when the Hadith at the tail end of the Hadith, it says that since then, mankind has been decreasing, which is why I said in the discussion that if you take a 5-foot decrease rate per generation, right? How many generations was Noah away from Adam? Is it 3 or 4 generations in Islamic parlance? That would be a 20-foot drop, or even let's say 25 foot. Make it 30 foot. Let's be generous. That would still make Noah 60 foot, and that's a decrease rate of 5 foot per generation. So you still have. This is what I'm saying. You still have the problem that you've got a 60-foot tall man getting on a boat with equally tall 2 sons and 3 daughters and his own wife, all getting on an ark and getting off the ark 60 foot tall. And this is where, when you get to Abraham would have been about 40 foot tall.
Okay, but if we look at the height, if you are 2 meters tall and you weigh 100 kilos, okay, so you weigh 1,000 kilos at 20 meters. So we're talking about a weight of 1.5 tons of one person.
Yes. And this is what I'm saying. He would have weighed what about the size of 2 full-grown elephants, 3 full-grown elephants?
Yes.
Exactly. There's 4 times taller than a giraffe, weighing as much as 3 full-grown elephants. This is what I'm saying. When you start analysing, the figures don't stack. And when you start analysing the consumption of food, the consumption of water, the consumption of carbohydrates, the blood pressure, the metabolism. I mean, can you think of the pressure? I mean, he'll have had to have been on all fours, crawling, flicking at the dirt with his fingernail to get some food out of the ground. The amount of pressure on his hips, on his shoulders, on his spine, he would not have been able to sustain eating, because the arduous task it would have been to him to get the food out of the ground in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't get around this. You can't get, and this is why I'm actually quite grateful that we had this topic here today, because you simply cannot get around reality. You have to go and spend some time in reality, and you have to go and look at all the consequences if you go and make those claims, because they do have an effect in reality. And you can't just claim it was magic and he was 30 meters tall in heaven, and then 2 meters tall when he was sent to earth. And, I mean, you are getting yourself into so many problems, because now you need to go and prove that this actually happened in heaven. Now you need to prove that Adam was created in heaven from dust. How are you going to do that? You can't.
But the thing is, though, stops. They can't say that he was 90 foot in heaven and say 6 foot on earth, because that's not what the Hadith teaches. It says quite clearly they've been decreasing. So if you're going to use the opening part of the Hadith and say, yes, we agree he was 90 foot tall, you can't then say, well, I'll actually conclude, I'll if you like, not accept the concluding part of the Hadith when it says that human beings have been decreasing since. You have to take that as part of the package. You can't just think, well, I'll believe that part and I won't believe that part. You know, I'm not. You know, I'll accept the first part of the Hadith, but I'm going to boycott the last part of the Hadith, where it talks about the mankind shrinking and decreasing in stature since then, because that flies in the face of what we know today. Anyway, let's assume that that's true. Let's give the Muslim the benefit of the doubt. Adam was 90 foot tall in heaven. He's now 6 foot tall on earth when Allah jettisoned them out, right? That in itself, I like to have seen that happen. How did he get from this physical realm, of spiritual realm in heaven, and how did he fly? Was there some kind of wormhole?
Exactly.
How did he land? How did he land? Did he land on all fours? Did he land on his back? Did he land on his head? You know, so we'll say that he was 6 foot tall on earth. That human beings haven't been decreasing since then; they've been increasing. You know, look at, say, like the Vikings. They were big men, the Vikings. You look at, say, some of the Roman centurions in the images that we have of in Roman art. Even some of the images that you have of Egyptian art have big, strong men. You don't have, you know, shorter men where they've been decreasing in stature. You've only got to look at, say, the basketball players and the American football players of today. Human beings have been growing, not decreasing. So Islam has got that wrong anyway. You can't.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
You can't get away from the Hadith. However you look at it, if you accept the first part, you've got to accept the second part. The Hadith falls apart. If you're just going to take the first part and boycott the second part, it still falls apart.
Reality beats fairy tale. I like all these discussions when people talk about, like, when Christian Prince comes up and talks to Muslims. I always think, you know, this is two adults discussing who is prettier. Is it Snow White or is it Cinderella? And this is the kind of level that we're at. And I don't understand that we cannot. I mean, there are so many. I think space is incredibly beautiful. There are so many wonderful things out there in our universe. Why do we still need to invent these stupid gods, these incompetent creator gods? I don't understand that. The logics. I mean, I've made how many, 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 videos now on the logics, and there's another one I need to make this weekend. I've decided I need to make another one. So I'm looking at the logics in the Quran. It's atrocious. It really does not make any kind of sense. And yet, when you ask a Muslim, please explain to me, give me one thing in the Quran that is correct, they can't.
I think this is where, yet again, my TJ myself spoke, and when I mentioned to the apostle, well, I forget what his name was, that we had as a guest last week, that for many Muslims, they are intelligent enough to see that this is a load of rubbish. I remember when I was growing up in Islam, I could see it was a load of rubbish. And I didn't even really recognize that much of Islam. I've learned more since leaving home than I did when I was a Muslim at home. I could see it was a load of rubbish. And there are smarter men than me in Islam that could see it's a load of rubbish. But there is a fear, a stigma, and a pressure not to leave it. And I think it's to do with culture, it's to do with pride, it's to do with position in the community, it's to do with family respect. There are so many other factors that are involved with Why some and so it's kind of like, well, you either leave it because of because it makes logical sense to leave it, or you've got no choice but to sit there and defend it. And this is where the frustration comes, because you're looking at intelligent people, wise people, and you can see that they are, but you can also see that they're fooling themselves. There's a cognitive dissonance that's taking place in their mind with their rationale as they're speaking. You can see it, and I think that the pressure is not so much Islam and the fear of becoming an apostate and being killed, because that seldom happens in, say, the West. Though it has happened, but it seldom happens. But the fear of how the family will react, the respect or the disrespect, the ostracism in the community, and everything else that goes along with the culture, that is the fear and the stranglehold on them.
Do you still think that the societal ostracism, yes, on the one side, but you have the very physical threat of death. Is that still a serious issue?
In this country, it depends on your location. Certainly abroad, without question of a doubt, that takes place. In England, I know of two situations where a girl had her throat cut by a father, and a son. His parents fed him glass in his food, and he only found out because the plate fell on the floor, and you could see the glittering of the glass against the light. So the threat's real, and I think in this day and age, because of the image of Islam, the threat becomes more real. I think a lot of situations now at the moment are suppressed by the media, and I think an example of the suppression by the media is in England, where we had the Muslim rape gangs, and how the police knew about it, but they were too scared to say anything about it. And that wasn't an isolated situation. That was on epidemic proportions through many police boroughs in the country that are having this problem, but were too fearful to say anything about it. And I think that's just one problem that they were, if they're scared to say something about that, it kind of shows you the other difficulties that they're too scared to say as far as the Muslim religion is concerned. Because you see, the difference is, if you speak against the Jewish religion or the Christian religion or the Zoroastrian or the pagan or the atheist, there is no repercussion from that. But there's a very real repercussion when you're dealing with the religion of Islam. And and as a 50-year-old man, I remember when Salman Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses and the furore that released in England. And I said back then, this should show you that there's an infrastructure in place in England of how the Muslims have if you like, communion with each other up and down the country, because they're united as one. And I liken it to like an England football game. Now, in the English Premier League, you have Tottenham fighting Arsenal and Chelsea fighting Leeds and Man United fighting, the football boy hooliganism, West Ham fighting Millwall. But come in an England game, they all unite. And that's how the Islamic religion is for me. And that's how I've seen it as I was growing up. They're all squabbling with each other until one person makes a comment about Islam and they suddenly galvanize and unite. And they're a force to be reckoned with. Because unlike, there is a serious recourse when you're taking on that religion, because the attack can come from anywhere. And more often than not, some people will attack just for the sake of notoriety.
Well, what I've noticed, and I don't know if this is just me, do you know that the Muslims in the UK are more Islamic and more fundamentalist than Muslims, for example, in Abu Dhabi?
Yes, absolutely. But they've got to be. When you're growing up in the Pakistani community in England, as I have grown up, they teach you that you're not going to be accepted in society right from the very beginning. You're not one of them. They won't accept you. They're not like you. They're nothing like us. Look at their women, the way their women dress. Look at the way that they drink alcohol. Look at the way they do this. So they brainwash you with like a contempt already for the indigenous population of which that you're growing up in. You see, you go to school. This is why you don't. You're trying to tell me in England, where there's probably, I don't know what the figures are, 5 million, and there's not one Muslim person that can play football that can get into the Premier League? Have a word. Do you see what I mean? And you don't see them doing things that, say, the Oriental people do, that the black people do, or what white people do. They don't do those things. They're very insular. They just keep themselves to themselves, and they have this culture of contempt for anything that's not them. And it's more so when they're in their own communities now, more so. And I've grown up with it. I hated it. I detested it. I saw the duplicity and hypocrisy on it, and as soon as I was old enough to legally leave home, I fled it. I had to get away from it. Have you ever seen the movie East is East?
Nope.
I
No.
recommend it, because whoever wrote East is East, he must have been like me, a half caste or dual heritage, Pakistani English, because word for word, everything in there is the reality of how I grew up. Absolutely, word for word. Even when the guy turns around and says, "I ain't marrying a fucking Paki," that I said that to my dad when my dad wanted me to marry a Pakistani woman from Pakistan. There was no way it was going to happen. No way.
Oh boy. Okay.
It's that, and if I can jump in real quick, I think it's that sort of like, mob mentality that they have too,
Yeah.
or like a pack mentality that's even more dangerous. And then, the fear for me is what's going to happen when like the population is going to double or triple in size. Are we going to see more and more attacks, or are we going to see less and less? I mean, I think that's a pretty rhetorical question, if I must say, because we all know the answer to that question. So, and I keep coming back to that point. I think that we need to have a serious discussion about immigration policy here in the West, and about who we're letting into the country, and in terms of a clash of values and a clash of cultures, because this is a real thing. I don't think it should be taken lightly, but the whole discourse is controlled by the multicultural left, because if you disagree with that, then you're then you're a racist, then you're a xenophobe, and blah blah blah. I think that ultimately we need to start having these discussions, because demographics matter ultimately, I think.
I don't think they're that naive or ignorant to it, though, TJ. I really do believe that they can see what the problem is, and there must be an end game here, because no matter what religion that you maybe concentrate and study on, when it's going as an immigrant to another country, say Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism, you don't have the issues with any of those religions or cultures. This religion, no matter where it goes, without exception, wherever it goes, schism, tension, and trouble follow it. It doesn't matter where it goes. You show me one place on earth where there's a Muslim community where they live peacefully as an immigrant religion in a country where there is no schism but peace and unity. Name one. Australia? No. New Zealand? No. Anywhere in Europe? No. America? No. Where? Nowhere.
Yeah, it's it, and for me, the biggest thing is when looking at Islam, in its totality, to me, to put the label of religion on it is quite an error, because indeed, there are divine aspects, there are religious aspects, but then there's also legal aspects, political aspects, social aspects, economics. It's pretty much everything rolled into one.
Yeah.
So there's nothing outside of its sphere. Nothing that can be considered private. So, and that's why if you look at Islamic states in general throughout history, they've been totalitarian in nature, where the government runs everything, and there's nothing left to the private sphere. So I think that's a very telling tale as well. Everything is
when you have a divine manifesto that turns around and says that everybody that's not Muslim is the worst of creatures, what are you going to expect from its adherents but to view you as worse than the creature, the worst creature that walks on the planet? That's their mentality. Because that's how their God teaches them to look at people. So what in expect are you going to get from a mentality like that?
Well, even more than that, I would say that these people that are coming into the Western countries, they already have a ready-made system, and not only that, it's superior to all their systems and ways of life, and the goal is to implement it throughout the world. So, what do you think is going to happen once their numbers become over 50%? What do you think is going to happen? I just don't get why people are so naive about this. I just don't understand.
I don't think they are. I think that personally, I look at this and think there's an end game at play here. And the conversations that people have, because people are aware of it. People are aware of it. They don't understand it, but they're aware of it. They're frustrated by it. They see what's going on. People are not as naive as some people may think. And I don't think the politicians and those that make the rules on immigration are kind of ignorant to the fact of the damage that is being caused by this religion, because they've got history to look at to help them understand when they're having their think tanks as to what the byproducts will be of having this mass immigration of this one particular religion. The things that we discuss, they are already aware of. But for me, I think that the immigration is quite deliberate, and it is deliberate for a reason. There's an end game at play there, and the reaction that human beings, the indigenous, are giving to this immigration is exactly the reaction that they want.
Yeah, I mean, this whole narrative and this whole conversation, I mean, is skewed from the start. It's so much based on feelings and emotions and sentiment, and when we can't put that aside and look at things as they are and not as they should be in some sort of idealistic world, because we don't live in that world.
But we did, though, in this country up until about 20 years ago. You did have debate programs, you did have discussions, you did have documentaries where you would listen to both sides of the arguments. And I think on the world scene today, in entertainment and in TVing and such, people are happy to say everything's done emotive and not on logic. So those discussions aren't there, because now you have like a cultural Marxism that if you have anything if you have an opinion that goes against the narrative, then you're prejudiced, you're a hate speecher, you're a hate monger, you're trying to cause a schism in the community. So anybody that talks the way you're doing, TJ, or Stops, or myself, when you have an opinion and it can be based on reality, then it's called hate mongering. I was watching RT today, for instance, and funny enough, they were talking about the FGM situation in America, and how and now the High Court judge turned around and said something like it's down to individual states as to whether they outlaw it or not. It's down to the individual. He's basically done the Pontius Pilate. He's washed his hands of it. The fact that you're going to leave female genital mutilation down to the decision of states. It's like we discussed last week. The word there aren't the words there. It's like he didn't want to have an opinion because he was scared of what the backlash that was going to be coming onto him.
Yep, fear.
Okay, do we have anything? Because Aziz is here. I'm going to activate him in a second. Just two things. If we talk. If Aziz talks, he talks. Try and let him finish. We finish as well. Try and get any question articulated and get the opinions out, but let's not try and talk over each other the way we did it last time. Okay?
Okay.
Welcome, Abdul Aziz. Welcome to the Jinn&Tonic show. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm not going to talk about what you wrote in the chat because that's utter nonsense. Is there anything that you want to comment on Adam in the Quran or in the Hadith?
No, not really. Not that much to comment on.
Do you know anything about Adam, about the claims?
Yes. Very, very tall, right?
That is the claim. Do you believe that Adam was very, very tall, 30 meters tall?
Do I believe? I haven't given it too much thought, but it could be a possibility. I mean, why wouldn't it be a possibility?
Because it's physically impossible.
Okay, you guys believe in ginormous dinosaurs, right?
Yes.
Okay, so is that physically impossible as well?
No.
So why is there ginormous dinosaurs and why can't we have ginormous humans?
Because of the skeletal structure.
And
dinosaurs are birds. They are built completely different. They don't walk upright. They walk on all fours or on bent forward. There are so many things which are totally different between dinosaurs and human beings. And can you imagine a human being weighing 1,500 kilos?
I mean, I have a hard time imagining a dinosaur weighing 1,500 kilos. I mean, but it could be a possibility.
That's because they didn't.
Dinosaurs didn't?
No.
I'm just saying, if, it could be a possibility. Just what's the difference between dinosaurs and giant humans? I mean,
that's what I just said. Everything.
I mean, it's a possibility. Wouldn't it be a possibility in your minds? It could be a possibility.
TDS Dave, can you help me out here? Dinosaurs are not birds. Birds are dinosaurs. Exactly. But I'm not sure. Did dinosaurs already have hollow bones? Because I'm not sure on this one. I know that the weight of a dinosaur was much less than 1,000 kilos. They were in the hundreds range, not more than that.
I think if I can just add that the brain size as well of dinosaurs are significantly smaller than the brain of a human being. Also, dinosaurs were reptiles; they were not mammals. So, and heat for a dinosaur or a lizard actually adds to the metabolism of the creature, whereas with human beings, heat doesn't add to the metabolism of a creature.
Yeah, but it's the weight factor.
Okay, sorry.
This is the question at the moment: is the weight in a factor in dinosaurs? I cannot give you an exact answer on the weight. The thing is that a human being with the skeleton, the way that it is built, we cannot hold a weight of 1.5 tons with the way that we are built. The weight on our ankles, for example, would be much too high. They would crumble. Our knees would not be able to handle that. So from the skeletal point of view, you cannot have a human being that is 30 meters tall weighing 1,500 kilos.
I mean, unless, I don't know, like, to me, ginormous dinosaurs should have bones made out of calcium to support the weight. Right?
Okay, you cannot compare dinosaurs to humans. Okay, they are built completely different. This is you cannot compare them.
In your mind, it's totally possible to have a stegosaurus, which is like 100 feet tall, right? And pretty heavy. Like, why isn't it in the realm of possibility to have humans that are that tall?
That's what I just explained.
Can I just add something there?
Yep.
Also, when we keep comparing dinosaurs with 90-foot Adam, but dinosaurs either walked on 4 feet, and those that walked on 2 feet walked more or less horizontally because the tail served as a counterbalance to the head and thorax. So when you're looking at Adam walking, he would have walked straight upright. So the weight would have been going down all onto, as you've said earlier on, stops onto his ankles. So the engineering wouldn't, of a 90-foot man would have been impossible for the muscle mass, the fat mass, and the bone mass to be for all that weight to be concentrated on just 2 ankles, if the man was walking vertical.
But let's look at it the other way around. What if dinosaurs only had 10% of the weight, and everything would be physically against the notion that a human being with a height of 30 meters can exist? Would you then still maintain, well, there's something wrong in our reckoning, the Quran or the Hadith are more correct, and therefore a human being of 30 meters height must have existed?
My argument to that would be, sorry.
I mean, for me, it's in the realm of possibilities that there was bigger humans than what we have today. I mean, but the precise measurement of 30, to me, I can dispute it a little bit, or I don't need to accept what we consider to be 30 meters to whatever they translated from a historical text, whatever they considered 30 meters or whatever is written. But I mean, to me, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that we did have ginormous humans at some point. I mean, we had really short ones. So, I mean, my logic would say, why didn't we have really big ones as well? So,
can I just add on that? Going with the dinosaurs, as you've brought out, as a possibility, if we go by the official narrative of as to how dinosaurs are found, and we look at the timescale, just before I go further forward, may I ask, do you believe that dinosaurs were on planet Earth before Adam? In your Islamic theology of belief, were dinosaurs on Earth before Adam, or at the same time as Adam?
From the theological point of view, I think it was God created the heavens and the earth and separated the waters and filled it with land and animals, and then created Adam in his image. I think that's the traditional thing. I think animals resided before man.
Okay, so but the thing is, you've just quoted the Bible there, not the Quran. So did the dinosaurs die out before Adam came to Earth in your Islamic understanding?
I mean, dinosaurs is our understanding of previous animals that lived. All I know, in my mind, there was animals that used to live and they don't live anymore. I mean, that could, based on...
Were dinosaurs and Adam, did they live as contemporaries to each other, in your understanding?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that dinosaurs and Adam, lived together. No, I wouldn't say that. But I'm just saying, in general sense, there was animals that lived that don't live. Yeah.
Okay, so can I ask then? I don't want to put words in your mouth, because I'm not a particularly bright person, so I'm just trying to get it in my own head. So you would say that Allah created dinosaurs, and then they died out for some reason, and then Adam was sent to Earth by Allah, but by the time that Adam got to Earth, all the dinosaurs had lived and died anyway. Would you agree to that?
I need to give it some thought, but what I wanted to say is, I just wanted to draw the realm of possibility that, we already have the idea of ginormous things that once walked the earth. I mean, when a person of belief says there was one time ginormous humans that walked the earth, you guys ridicule it. But, a person who espouses theological belief can equally ridicule your belief of dinosaurs in the same manner. I'm just saying you already entertain the idea of ginormous beings that walk the earth.
I hear what you're saying. I just want to ask then, why is it then, if you believe that dinosaurs were on Earth and then they're dying out, and then Allah sent Adam to Earth after the dinosaurs, why is it we've been able to find the remains of dinosaurs, but we've not been able to find the remains of human beings of such great stature? And when you consider the Hadith teaches that human beings have been diminishing since they've been on Earth, from 90 foot to 85, 80, 70, it would seem to me that the easiest thing to find, if you're digging as a paleontologist, would be evidence of human beings of this size. But it seems that we find dinosaurs, and we've even found dinosaur excrement, but we've not found any human beings of this kind of size, or even evidence of their existence, like the pots, the pans, the tools, the weapons, the clothing and such. Can you explain that?
If you look at let's look at the dinosaur case. How far are they found? This answer to be entertained properly, people need to understand geology and how sediment rock is formed and how deep the bones are found. And this is a whole different factors of scientific fields converging to be able to answer this one question. But the primary understanding of why are we able to find dinosaur bones fossilized is because the Earth went through a cataclysmic event that involved a number of factors of ash and floods and mud that was able to bury the bodies of dinosaurs rapidly. And because of this fast burial and with mud and sediment, the bones fossilized and became rock essentially, and this is why we're able to find them. But how normal animals live and die, the calcium disintegrates into the earth, and this is why it's very difficult to find animals that lived 100 years ago or 3,000 years ago that basically they decompose, go back into the ecosystem or what have you. The few times we do find remnants from animals is through instances of like quick freeze, or if they're buried in pot ash or clay, or they drowned it in the swamp. We get very good archaeological digs and finds from these specific animals that were preserved through nature. But if we look at how an animal lives and dies to the bone, it disintegrates because it's made out of calcium, and there's even little insects that eat the calcium.
Okay,
You know?
can I ask then, if you're using Islamic genealogy with reference to Adam and the 5-foot decrease rate per generation, at least when Noah came off the ark, he himself would have been about 60 foot tall, and then subsequently Abraham would have been 40 foot tall. So can you explain to me then, why isn't it post-flood that we've not been able to find evidence of human beings of that kind of stature? I mean, I'm assuming in Islamic belief that these people would have been buried and had graves built for them. And you're talking about calcium deposits and the bones disintegrating. Iron, on the other hand, or steel, or whatever pottery that they ate, the food vessels, they would not have disintegrated with time. So I'm assuming that we should find evidence of clothing of giant human beings, weapons of giant human beings, pots and pans of giant human beings, and indeed houses of giant human beings. If not pre-flood, certainly post-flood, even going up to Abraham, who would have been, in Islamic parlance, 40 foot tall.
Well, that goes back to lifestyle. If you look at how prehistoric man lived, he lived within his means of, in the sense, whatever nature can provide him. So it provided him, wood, raw materials that are biodegradable. So a lot of these things, unless something happens that involves a tremendous amount of mud or pot ash or a fire or something to preserve these artifacts, they decompose,
Okay.
and
But the weapons wouldn't have decomposed, would they?
Well, if you look at the evolution of weaponry, it was rocks chipped into spears and wood. Metallurgy, in the sense of manipulating metal alloys, was a later development, 2,500 years, 5,000 years ago. But for the most part, the vast majority of humankind existed within their means of whatever they can.
I'm mentioning Abraham being 40 foot tall, and obviously that's following the logic of Islam and the Hadith. But Abraham would not have been the only human being on planet Earth that's 40 foot tall, considering that we've all for every human being in Islamic parlance would have come from Adam. That would have mean all human beings would have been around about 40 foot tall, who were of the same generation of Abraham. So we're not just looking for what. Yeah, exactly. So we don't find any human being. And when you consider how far away Abraham is to Muhammad as far as genealogy is concerned, we should find enough evidence of human beings even being 40 foot tall. We should find abundance of evidence of human beings existing, not just their bones, but also evidence of their lifestyle as well.
Yes. Okay. Here's the thing about this discrepancy. When a lot of times when ancient manuscripts uses descriptive language, it's not necessarily accurate. The idea is accurate. When they say that an individual was tall in stature, they're talking about more than just the physical body. They're talking about his great personality as well, and the life that he lived. Also, is understood to be part of why they call him a giant or a tall person or a great man. Follow me?
True, but I mean, we're not talking about, say, like poetic language. He was a great man. He was a big man. He was larger than life. We are giving specific measurements. That's not, say, an embellishment of a person's personality or his stature. That's giving a specific measurement to the man's height.
But the point that we're trying to make, Aziz, come on. If we look at reality, if we look at, I just looked it up, a T-Rex weighs something like 10 tons. A human would have weighed like 250 tons. No, sorry, 25,000 tons.
Did you look at the Stegosaurus? The Stegosaurus?
This is the T-Rex. 10 tons, around 10 tons, depending on what species, what type it is. That's around 10 tons. So we're looking at a huge difference, a huge monumental difference in weight. We're looking at a huge monumental difference in food requirements. We're looking at huge monumental difference in every single thing. And yet, the only fossils we have ever found, the only evidence we have ever seen in anything from history, all go towards humans being shorter, not taller. And now what you are saying is, yeah, but hang on, there is this Muhammad, and Muhammad said something to somebody else. He said to somebody else, and he told somebody, and then 300 years later, somebody wrote this down. And what Muhammad said is, yes, Adam was 30 meters or 90 feet tall. And now what you are saying is, I am disregarding all the facts that we know. I'm disregarding everything around us that we see. And I'm going with this account of somebody telling us a fairy tale about some guy who said that this is 30 meters high. And now you're telling us that we should somehow just believe this based on absolutely nothing when everything tells us no. Is that what you are saying?
I'm not telling you to believe in anything. That's I've never ever said that. You guys got to believe what I believe. And I never said you guys got to believe what another person says about Islam and how tall people were. No,
I'm asking you, do you seriously expect us to believe that this is what makes sense?
No, I don't want you guys to believe in something that you don't perceive, that doesn't make sense to you. That's not my intentions. My intentions is to basically talk about, you guys already entertain the idea of tall creatures, large creatures, but you guys don't want to entertain the idea that humans were once tall and great. That's the main point that I was trying to make. Now, specifically to the book and the text, I haven't looked at it, and, logic, to me, if it doesn't make sense, I don't accept it anyway, but I don't think that's the point for me to read the text and be like, yes, 100% there was people that are 30 feet tall that lived back in the day. No, I don't think, for me, that's what I take from it. I get the idea that when I read things like that, it means that there was great humans in the past. That's how I read it. But
okay, do you acknowledge then that it is possible that this is wrong?
Well, I wouldn't say it's wrong. I think we're trying to understand it in a scientific matter. I dispute the actual measurements. I'm thinking is how is it that the measurements that people took back in the day were even accurate, and how did we even translate the measurements to be 30 and 90 feet? 30 meters or 90 feet. So for me, the measurements are inherently inaccurate because I don't trust the ancient man's ability to measure accurately. And I don't know if we even translated their measurements into our accurate measurements using, metric systems and stuff like that. But I do believe that humans were great in the physical and spiritual sense back in the day. I don't necessarily have to believe that it's 30 feet tall. Follow me, guys?
Can I just on that point about measurements? The measurements that we have today have been standardized based on the measurements that you used in the past, like a cubit, 18 inches. That is still recognized today as a cubit, 18 inches. And we know that we're using measurements like that because you can read books like Pharaohs and Kings by David Roll, who shows through architecture and the antiquity of the past how those measurements were used in the past. So when Muhammad used the term a cubit, which is 18 inches, we know that that's what they were using as a measurement back then because we have evidence today of that. So it wasn't the case of, well, a cubit back then might have only been 3 inches. No, and today it's 18 inches. No, a measurement is a measurement is a measurement that has been standardized and still in use today.
Yeah, I totally don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, for me, it's very hard for me to believe that somebody took measurements and these measurements are accurate to, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. They were using cubits and we're using metric system. I mean, like the reported height, for me, the numerical number of the reported height is not important. For me, what's important is the idea that man used to be great physically and spiritually back in the day because they were closer to God, so to speak.
Could I ask, and I ask this with respect, I don't mean to be disrespectful because you yourself have been very courteous since you've come on, but may I ask, is this because you're actually, as a Muslim, quite embarrassed that you're learning for the first time that your prophet, the mercy to mankind, an example, has made a statement using specific numbers and specific measurements that you find hard to comprehend, that you have to accept as a reality, so you're trying to be poetic in denying it?
No, I'm not denying. I'm not trying to deny or affirm anything, but for me, it's not beyond the realm of possibility in my mind that Muhammad wasn't. To me, Muhammad wasn't being scientific by giving that number. If Muhammad said it, is that fair to say?
But he was specific in. I'm not suggesting he was being scientific. Stating how tall something is isn't a scientific study, is it? It's just a statement of a fact.
No, but it's something that would be admissible as scientific evidence for whatever the scientific method, right? Like we use measurements, part of the scientific method to provide arguments and whatever, right? Well, what I'm trying to say is that what I'm trying to say is that I'm pretty sure that Muhammad, if he said these statements, his intention wasn't to be accurate scientifically. I think his intentions were to be accurate metaphorically. You understand?
No. This is how can this be the case? I mean, we are supposed to believe something that Muhammad told us, which is supposed to guide us for the rest of our lives so that we can spend eternity in the best possible place. Now, if you are saying, well, Muhammad wasn't really in the know and he was like being inaccurate and he was just sort of la-di-da-di-da, how is this guidance then for somebody to do the right thing?
Okay. This goes to like a whole different theological discussion, but I'm just, I don't want to get into it because it's time consuming. I don't think you guys have the patience and energy to listen to me for like an hour. But what I'm trying to say is, in my mind and how I understand it, to me, it doesn't, Muhammad didn't say a scientific statement when he said 30 feet tall. Could we agree to that? We can all agree to that.
That is scientific.
It's possible in your mind.
No. That's a scientific claim that he was 940 years old and that he was 60 cubits high. That's scientific.
But is it scientifically accurate?
Well, this is the question. This is exactly what we're talking about at the moment. Yeah. I'm saying, no, it is not possible that it's scientifically, it violates all scientific or physical laws that we are aware of. And you are saying, well, it doesn't.
No, I agree with you, actually. Well, this is what I'm trying to say, is that you guys are assuming that Muhammad was being scientific when he made these statements. I'm saying he was being metaphorical. That's
okay. But how are you, with respect, how are you able to differentiate the difference between, say, a poetic statement and a scientific statement? I mean, what are you basing that on? Because it sounds like to me then, you, as a Muslim, you could pretty much go through life and find things that, if you don't like it, well, he meant that metaphorically. He meant that as a parable. He meant this as anything but literal.
Well, if you look at how Muslim communities sometimes organize themselves around, but actually they always organize themselves around belief. There's people who say you can't take things metaphorically, you can only take things literally, and then there's people that say there's a metaphysical element and so on and so forth. To me, this is a fundamental question of belief in general. Not only I struggle with it or other Muslim communities struggle with it. Anybody who has faith struggles with this subject. It's to differentiate what is practical, what is reasonable, and what makes sense, and what requires belief as well. To me, this is not an issue. To me, when I read this, my understanding immediately is a reference of people of great stature. To me, the number is not significant.
Okay, so
if I were going around and I was preaching, for example, no, you have to believe that these individuals were 90 feet tall. That's a different argument, which I'm not preaching it, and I don't espouse it to be preached at all, because I don't think that's the main idea behind this snippet of information.
Okay, but do you then think, if you don't mind me asking, then that if you think that Muhammad was being figurative and not literal, then how do you reconcile that when Allah turns around and says in his Quran that I know this is not the Quran, it's a hadith we're quoting, but the principle can clearly apply to the hadith as well, that this is a book made clear, a book easy to understand, a book sent us guidance. Now, Allah talks about the Quran, and he's using Muhammad as his prophet. He would know what's going to come out of Muhammad's mouth, and he will know how his listeners are going to interpret what comes out of his mouth. So when Muhammad turns around and says he was 90 foot tall, and then he qualifies the human being decrease rate by saying human beings have been diminishing since, that's not figurative, that's literal. And it would be quite clear if you consider that the Quran, by Allah's own words, is a book made clear, easy to understand, and he's using a prophet that he would know would be a prophet making things clear and easy to understand too. So how do you reconcile that? Hello?
He can't find his unmute button. You dumbfounded him.
Oh, sorry, gentlemen. I was talking and I didn't know I was unmuted. The Quran in the time of Muhammad is Muhammad himself. So when the Quran says we've made the Quran, clear, it's talking also about the life that Muhammad is living as well, and what's the cause and the effects and the results and so on and so forth. So, it's kind of tricky to understand it, but
even though Allah said it's clear to understand, you're saying it's tricky to understand. Though Allah himself said
because I'll tell you why. Because most contemporary Muslims look at the book, right? They look at the book, the Quran, as a physical book, but the Quran is a manifestation of Muhammad during Muhammad's time. That's the difference. So it's the book is also referring to that verse is also referring to Muhammad and his actions and the trajectory of Muhammad, not just a physical book to read, but the life that Muhammad is living with the companions.
So how can that reconcile? How do you reconcile 90 for Adam as being figurative and not literal, even though Muhammad, who would be quite an easy person to understand in the way that, and the reason why Allah chose him, meant it literal because he gives a specific height, and then he qualifies the fact that human beings have been shrinking in size or decreasing in size or diminishing in size ever since Adam. So that's not figurative. That's a literal statement. It's a scientific statement.
Oh, okay. If you're familiar with Islamic theology,
I am.
I
am. I'm an ex-Muslim.
Okay. So you understand that for every progressing generation in Islamic theology of mankind, people became more decadent and deviant. This corresponds with their shrinking height as well.
Can you elaborate on that? Because what you're saying is then that the human beings only shrank because they were moving, if you like, further away from Allah. So the further away from Allah human beings, as they were growing and generation after generation, they were moving away from Allah. So that that genetically manifests itself in their DNA for them to shrink in I
Okay.
How does
I basically said that. I basically said that. You put some scientific language to it, and that's basically what I said. In other terms, the more further they got away from the way of God, their height also decreased, which
it affected them. It affected them at the biomolecular level. The further away they were moving from Allah, the more their DNA was infected.
I wouldn't call it an infection. I wouldn't say I would say
it would be, wouldn't it? It would be an infection if it's not what you're in. If you're not what Allah intended, and your stature is decreasing.
I mean, scientifically, I think it would be called a genetic mutation. Scientifically, I want to call it an infection. But me, I'm not trying to go into the scientific language. I want to stay within the theological language.
But
Is that okay?
But human beings decreasing in size is a scientific matter. I know spiritually what you mean by they were moving further away and becoming more deviant from Allah and His requirements. That's a spiritual aspect. What I'm trying to grasp is, how does the spiritual aspect of your deviation from Allah manifest itself at the biomolecular level in your DNA that subsequently makes you shrink in size?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you understand as being closer to God and further away from God. If you ask a Muslim, the understanding of being close to God is holistic. So what to eat, how to live, so on and so forth, etc. So if you're moving away further from God, you're also not knowing how to live, not knowing how to eat, not knowing how to be healthy, not knowing how to be spiritually, mentally healthy. So that should manifest itself on a genetic level as well, because we're products of our environment and products of our diet.
Okay,
right?
so by implication, then, shouldn't Muhammad have been the tallest human being ever in existence? Because nobody would have been closer to Allah than Muhammad. In fact, when you look at the Quran and the Hadith and the Seerah, no one could be more glorified amongst mankind, even more glorified than Adam, than Muhammad himself. So surely Muhammad will have at least been 95 foot tall, because he was the closest one. He wasn't a deviation. He was actually a progression, wasn't he?
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But that's why I say. That's why I also say it's not necessarily 100% only about the physical height. Also, the spiritual aspect you have to take in consideration. I mean, for sure, in my opinion, because I'm biased, I'm Muslim. Yeah, Muhammad was very enlightened and close to God. Right. And to me, the evidence of that is that, Muslims and non-Muslims alike like to talk about Muhammad for good or bad. So to me, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I don't know how to approach it. I don't know how to dissect it. But to me, it doesn't really bother me.
So it doesn't bother you that Muhammad made a statement that Adam was 90 foot tall, of which there should be tons upon tons upon tons and thousands upon thousands of generations of human beings being of ginormous sizes, yet there's no evidence of them being found. There's no evidence of their existence by way of pots, weapons, tools, and clothing and such. That hasn't manifested itself, so that can't add to your faith. And then you say that the reason that human beings have shrunk in size is because they've moved further, they've deviated from the course of Allah, even though Allah himself doesn't make such a statement and Muhammad himself doesn't make such a statement. Can you then ask, can you then answer then, why is it that the height of human beings is capped at about 6 foot then? Surely, as an apostate that I am myself, as an ex-Muslim apostate, in Allah's eyes, if you're a non-Muslim, you're the worst of creature anyway. But you're going to be even worse than the worst of creatures as an apostate like I am. So why is it that I'm 6 foot tall and I'm not 2'3"? Because surely no one could be more further away from Allah than I am. So I should be even smaller than a primordial dwarf.
I like that you mentioned that. That's why I said many times, for me, at least, it doesn't necessarily mean height, or it has to mean height. That's the difference.
But you did say that.
For the same reason.
You did say that.
For the same reasons. But yeah, but it doesn't necessarily have to always and only mean height, right? That's the difference. You guys want it to be always.
Come on, please. No, don't do this.
What? Well, look.
Come on, you've been caught.
I mean, I've been caught with what? With my hands caught red-handed?
No, with logics.
Look, theology and logic are incompatible. You know that, right?
And so are you.
Okay? Do you guys know that? The theology has nothing to do with logic. I'm sorry. But at the same time, it has everything to do with logic.
Would you then accept then that Islam is not logical then? By using that rationale, Islam is not logical.
Look. What I'm trying to say is the parameters you measure Islam and theology is not designed to measure Islam and theology and spirituality. Your mind only works with the physical realm. I'm serious. That's the tragedy. You guys have shrunken pineal glands. You guys don't use the left side and the right side of your brains. You can't. You only use the left. I'm sorry. But it's true. You guys are a creation of hyperlogicism. That's it.
Okay, why do you, when you're in the chat, why do you talk such shit?
Because I like to.
Okay, do we have anything serious that we want to add, or shall we call it a night? Because this is not going anywhere, I think. And I really don't want to open up a new topic now, because we could open up a new topic and start from scratch. But is it really worth it? I don't know. Or do people want this?
I just want to put before I leave, I have to leave anyway, but it was a nice show. But I just wanted to say one thing, and that thing is, thank you for letting me come on your show. And I think these dialogues are very important, and they should always have a Muslim guest. And yes, thank you again.
Please come back. Please come back.
Yes, I'll come back for my my crucifixion, my intellectual crucifixion by the hands of the atheists.
Thanks, Aziz. Yeah.
Thank you, Aziz.
All right, guys. Then, is there anything else that we want to add? Is there anything else that we want to talk about?
After that discussion, I'm stumped.
Yeah, but guys, well done. Really, I think this was really well done. I think you kept it together. This was very polite, very respectful. I thought, great. Really, I'm very proud of everybody. The way that we behave, super. Okay. Then I'll just go for the hadith. Didn't I have a hadith somewhere? Oh shit.
Allah is getting mad at you, Stops. Come on, bro. Get this right.
Yeah, I had one just now, which was great, which is actually, I found one in connection with Adam, but for some odd reason, here we go. All right. The Lord called out to him, Adam, is it from me that you are fleeing? Adam replied, no, my Lord, but I feel shame before you. When God asked what had caused his trouble, he replied, Eve, my Lord. Whereupon God said, now it is my obligation to make her bleed once a month, as she made this tree bleed. I must also make her stupid, although I created her intelligent, and must make her suffer pregnancy. And Ibn Zayd continued, were it not for the affliction that afflicted Eve, the women of this world would not menstruate, and they would be intelligent, and when pregnant, give birth easily. Reference here is Tabari, Volume 1, 280 to 281.
Such a pro female faith.
Well, almost, yes. Well, come on. I mean, we started off with a goodie of the day, so we ended with a not so good hadith of the day. So here we go. All right, ladies, gents, and others, thank you very much. It was brilliant. It was good fun. And I'm sorry Rob couldn't be here today. He'll be back next week. And then hopefully, I don't know if you've seen in the chat with Saracen. Saracen is going to talk to us as soon as he's ready with the topic about the different, well, the science of the hadith, how they go in the different madhabs, how they categorize and how they test different hadiths to give us some insight into how this is done in the different madhabs. So I'm looking forward to that. If anybody else wants any kind of time, a slot on here, just hit us up, ask us if you want to, lecture something. And please, this is not only from atheists. This is not only from Christians. A Muslim is more than welcome. We've had Muslims on the show before, so this is not something new that we've now suddenly introduced. Please come and give us, if you have a lecture, if you have a topic, give us some insight. Last words, Thunderous.
Thank you very much indeed for giving me an opportunity to present a hadith and elaborate on that. I thank you for that opportunity, and hopefully sometime in the future you'll give me another opportunity to present something else.
Absolutely. TJ?
Yeah, just, thanks for having me on, and Allah knows best.
Thanks, Thunderous, for doing this. Very, very welcome, and thank you very much for digging into this and doing the research and then presenting it. Well done, excellent job, guys. See you next week. Cheerio.
Bye bye.